What's poppin', mi gente? Your boy's back. Back with another video. Now this is gonna be a quick video because I just wanted to briefly talk about something that I feel gives any programmer a massive amount of control and power, as well as helping to keep your code elegant looking, as I call it. Extensions. An extension is basically a method that you can access from just about anywhere. If you're going to have code that you know you're going to use 30, 40 times in your project, you want to turn it into an extension. So let's get into how to do that. First thing is you're going to want to just create a script. Name it whatever you want. In this case, I named it My Extensions. Now, once you create that script, I would put it in its own namespace. In this case, I picked Custom Extensions. And the reason you want to do this is because then all you have to do at the top is type in the word using and then Custom Extensions, which was the name of the namespace, and then you have access to all of the methods you put into your extensions file, which I have one right here in a bright kind of banana yellow color, play clip once. Now, once you do that, the next step is you want to go ahead and for the class name itself, make it public and static. And this is, again, we don't want to attach this to anything, but we still want to have full access to it. Is there a lot more involved in on the technical backend as to what this does? Yes, but for your purposes, the important part is create a namespace, put public static in front of the class name, and make sure you remove the colon mono behavior after this. Now that we've done that, we have our extensions file set up. So let's look at how we actually create the method itself. Now there's one here, but I'm actually going to go to a specific one that I just created that I want to use as an example to show you guys how useful these things are and how much cleaner your code will look if you use them properly. And here we are. This is a simple helper method that's going to check and see if we've hit a solid object. Now we need to make the method public and static so it's accessible everywhere. And I'm making it a bool here because I want this to return either true or false. We're checking for a collision with a solid, and we're either going to get yes, we've hit a solid, or no, we haven't. Now the key here is what makes this different from another method is the keyword this right here. What this is saying is when I call this method, I am going to submit a collider 2D, and we are going to call it, reference it as C here. That's what makes this an extension, this keyword. Keep that in mind. This bool is just another parameter that we're passing in here that we need, okay? So the important part, public static, the type you want to return, which you can put void if you don't want to return anything here, the name, and then this and what you're going to pass to it. And I'll show you what that means in a moment. As for the method itself, well, it's looking at a collider and it checks, are we checking a layer that has what I'd call solid tiles, which layer 8 is what I use for the foreground, and layer 9 is what I use for extra tiles. Like you might notice when I go through the scene view that I have blue tiles that are square tiles in there for solids, maybe around the edge of the screen to keep the player from walking off the far edge of the screen, or green tiles for slopes, for example. And if we're not checking either one of those layers, there's nothing else to do. So just exit out, return false. If we keep going, then we're just going to check the tag on each and every solid possible tile that I have in the game. You can put whatever you want in here, okay? But that's basically what it's going to do. If we hit a solid, we're going to return true. If not, return false. So now let's take a quick look at where I actually use this extension method. And here we are. This is for an object called Candelabra 00. That object, for those of you who played the prologue, it's those large candles. There are two different size ones, medium and taller ones, including in Dracula's room. Okay, this is for the pieces spawned when the candelabras are destroyed. Now you can see right here we reference c.checkCol with solid, and you can see up here this is an on trigger enter. We get a collider 2D, which we pass in here C and then dot and then the extension name. Now we don't have to pass anything else in here because in the extension I put this parameter to automatically assume it's false. If I hadn't put equals false, we would have had to have passed that in as well, but that's a long story made very short. And then you can see it's very short here. You know, we just do a couple of things and that's that. We're done. So how much easier is this making your life, and why should you care? Well, let me show you an example of another script I have where this extension method is not used. Right here. Now this isn't a big deal. This isn't a lot of code, but this can get messy having to type this in over and over. And you also have to keep in mind the fact that if you make a mistake, well, Now you've got to go back and debug and figure it out, and it's just, well, you'll see what I mean in a second here. We have one extra variable to take into account, but the rest of this is exactly the same, you'll notice. We check the layers, 8 or 9, we check the same tags. So, we're just going to do this. Let's yank this all out. Up top, let's make sure we have using custom extensions. We do. So now we will have access to all of those extension methods that are located within our custom extensions namespace. And all I have to do is erase all this, type a dot after the C because it's a collider 2D, and you can see right here is our extension method. And that's it. We can yank the rest of this code out except for this. We do need to check the speed here, so let's put in an and speed.y is less than or equal to -3. We're done. That's it. We're finished. Look how much cleaner and shorter this is. I'm also going to do this again above because, oops, look what I did when I was doing the movement for this object. I forgot to include horizontal movement. It only moves vertically. Now, we do have another extension method right here that is for movement with no collision check. And this is very useful for things like flame puffs, which aren't going to collide with anything. Or if I have an object that has a rigid body 2D that's kinematic, as well as a collider on it. What it means when I say kinematic on the rigid body 2D is it means it's not going to move it, but we still want to return on collision calls. Or in this case, because I set the collision box to be a trigger, on trigger calls, which I need. Okay? So, since this is a block that we don't need exact collision checks on every step, we can just move it and then use the actual Unity on trigger enter methods. Now for something more specific like the player that we want to be exact, you'd want to make sure that your movement, if you're going to do it pixel by pixel like I'm doing here, and again, feel free to use any of these methods. All I'll ask is that you put a link to the Patreon page and credit me. But this is basically saying we're going to move 1 pixel at a time here. Normally there would be a collision check between each of these pixel movements, but again, for something like this, it doesn't matter because even if it goes a few pixels into the floor, you're never going to notice it because it's a block that's going to turn to dust. And it actually helps with some things like, for example, the candelabra pieces that I mentioned a few minutes ago. If some of them go a little more into the ground than the others, it doesn't look bad because they instantly turn to flame puffs. It actually makes it look a bit more chaotic, like some of them are colliding differently like objects do in real life. And it actually adds a bit more of a realistic look to it. If you're not sure what I'm talking about, try it for yourself. Now, if you want a pixel perfect collision, again, every time you move by a pixel, you would want to do a collision check. If you're moving horizontally, you'd want to do your horizontal collision check. If you're moving vertically, you'd want to do your vertical collision check. But that's a totally different subject that I could literally talk about for a few hours here. So what you need to gather from this is just a simple method that moves us 1 pixel by the time, so we get pixel perfect movement. Okay. So, I messed up here. I forgot the horizontal, so let's do this. This method, this extension method, you can see it takes a vector 3. It's public static. It is going to return a vector 3, and it takes in a vector 3, along with a vector 2 for speed and a vector 2 for subpixels. Subpixels, for those of you who don't know what that is, old school games just moved the whole pixel. They didn't use float values. So something like Mega Man, you'll notice, for example, Mega Man would move 1 pixel most of the time, but sometimes he would move 2 pixels at once if you actually pause the game and look at it frame by frame. That's because Mega Man's speed could have been something like 1.5, for example. So he'd move 1 pixel on the first frame. On the second frame, he'd move 1 pixel, but each of those frames we added 0.5 together. So frame 1, we had 0.5 left over. Frame 2, we had another 0.5. Now we have another whole pixel. So on frame 2, now he'd move that extra pixel. But that's all that is. This is just, again, passing in parameters. Again, we're going to take in a vector 3, and we're going to return a vector 3, which is transform.position. So you can see here we have transform.position equals, and we're going to put transform.position. Now let's just hit dot, and let's go find our little method since we don't know what the name is. Movement, no collision check. And I need to reference speed. Now, the variables have an underscore in the extension methods just so I know what to type in here, what to reference. And we should be done except, uh-oh, it looks like I forgot to declare a subpixel variable. So guess what? I made 2 errors there. Number 1 was no horizontal movement, and number 2, we were actually moving by subpixels. So let's correct that right now. Vector 2, subpixel equals vector 2, dot 0. There we go. We're still getting an error, so I probably messed up with the name. Hold up. Now, I understand what my error is. Let me show you guys. See, we have the ref keyword here. That means we want to directly take in the subpixel value and return it. Whatever we do to subpixel in here will be done to the subpixel variable found in the method we're working on. So we need to put the ref keyword here. This is very helpful because this method is going to return a vector 3 for transform.position. We don't need to modify the speed, but we do need to modify subpixel. By using the ref keyword, it's basically going to link this subpixel variable to this, whatever we do to it here. That's a nice short way of making your life a lot easier when you want to pass a variable in as a parameter and you want it to be directly modified by the method being used wherever the method is found and whatever other script it's found in. Okay? But look how simple that was. It took me about 2 minutes to correct an issue with my movement engine. That's all it took. Now, let's go back to scene view and make sure everything works good. We're going to have to go ahead and take a look at the hatches switch block. So give me a second. I'm going to click right over to that. Okay, so here we are back in scene view. Here is the object that we were just editing the script for. This little switch block located right here within the hierarchy. And you can see, here's our script. Pro hatch switch block. So let's go ahead and hit play. When this object's HP equals 0, it should fall, hit the ground, collide, and turn to dust. And you can see it works perfect. There is one more thing I want to show you. Now I'm going to do this in slow motion. I want you to look over here at the transform and the positions. X-wise, it does not move. Y-wise, you'll notice it's only going to move by whole digits. Notice the Y goes down by a whole number. There's no decimals in there. And that's exactly what we want. It's moving on a pixel by pixel basis. See? It's moving multiple pixels at once because of the loop. And you see it collided with the ground. It looks perfect. We don't have any problems there. So that's that. Mission accomplished. Okay, so as you guys have just seen, extension methods can be extraordinarily powerful and useful. Keep this in mind too, is that the movement for not only this object, the hatch switch block, but also the candelabra pieces uses this, and there'll be a lot more things that'll use this as the game goes on, including the flame puffs. So if later on down the line I decide I need to modify this some, and I want to add in, let's say, collision, I can always put in collision code in here, and then I can easily, let's say I want to have some things with collision and others without, I can put another variable here that's a bool. I set it to false by default, so that, hey, unless I change this to true, whenever I call the extension method, we won't check collision. And that's extremely powerful because, again, I can go modify the movement and collision checks for everything that use this at once. Versus, let's say if I had 30 different things and 30 different separate methods, well, guess what? If I find a bug later or I want to upgrade them, now I have to do it 30 times. So you can see how powerful this will be. It's also good at saving you time when it comes to just typing out things. For example, dealing with the transform and dot position, local scale, rotation, whatever. Let's say position. If I want to modify the X value of position, normally you can't do that. Getting an error, as you can see here. Cannot modify the return value of transform dot position because it's not a variable. On the other hand, if I was to modify a variable I have above that is a vector 2 and I wanted to change the X value, I can do that. Now, if you wanted to modify just the X value here, here's what you'd have to do. And I showed this on a previous video, but I'm going to show it to you guys again for those who didn't watch that video. And what this is saying is that we want to modify, we want to create a new vector 3 and we want to change the X value to 0, but then we want to keep the transform.position.y and z values the same. And this doesn't seem like a big deal, but type that out 1,000 times and it'll drive you crazy. It also can be messy when you're using calculations for the X value here, and this could potentially be all the way over here. It could be this long. So instead, we have an extension method that does this for me. And that's it. We're done. Now again, that doesn't look like we're saving on much typing here, but when you do that 1,000 times, it definitely makes a difference. And again, this is just a simple setting the X value. There's no calculations involved. If there was some long calculation there, believe me, you would really not want to type all that junk out and then have to come back and check through your code later. It'd be ultra messy. By the way, here is the extension method if you guys want it. It's simple. Again, public static, takes in a vector 3. We use the this keyword. It's going to take in a vector 3, which is transformed opposition. And then the amount we want to modify the X by, we have 1 for Y and 1 for Z also. And again, you guys are welcome to this because I personally hate having to type out all that junk whenever I want to modify the transform and then change position or angle or what have you. Okay, so that's it for this video. As always, if you want to leave a comment down below, you're seeing this video on YouTube, you're more than welcome to, but I'm going to tell you the same thing I always say. Become a Patreon supporter if you want to ask questions, give feedback, make suggestions, etc., as I do not read YouTube comments. Out of 1,000 comments, I might see 1, and that's it. And I even have people that generally will respond and like them for me. So when I say I'm not seeing them and you need to join my Patreon, I mean it. If you can't afford to do that, you can always give a one-time donation via PayPal. Both links will be down below. As always, if you can't afford to do any of that, I get it. You're more than welcome to still join the Facebook group or the forums and talk to the like-minded Castlevania fans. Forum's quiet right now because I haven't had a release out, but the Facebook group, we do get a good number of people in there who put all kinds of content up. So you're more than all welcome. So that's it. I want to thank you all for taking the time to check out this video. I, as always, want to thank all of my Patreon supporters. I think my next video is going to pick up on some of the subjects I didn't get to discuss in the video before this one, but this video I felt like was extremely pivotal before we go any further because custom extensions can really make your life a lot easier. So I'm out. I hope everybody's staying safe and healthy out there. I will talk to you all soon, and once again, thank you all for the support. Deuces.